Hi, my name's Peter Malliaros and I'm the Australian Federation Party candidate for the seat of Lalor. The reason I'm making this video, the inspiration behind it was Topher Field's Marble video, which essentially shows and educates how the preferential system works in Australia. He's done a great job of that. That video is predominantly focused on people who have already made up their mind that they'd like to vote for the freedom-friendly minor parties. But there are approximately 30% of you out there that haven't really decided who you're going to vote for. And that's who this video is being made for. With regards to Topher's Marble video, the link for that will be at the end of this video. So have a look at that. It's a must watch. Okay, so why am I standing for the seat of Lalor? Now, I could sit here and say it's because of the vaccine mandates that I oppose them. Or I could say that I oppose the ongoing COVID lockdowns, or the destruction and devastation that's being caused to individuals and families across Australia. And all of that, of course, would be true. However, as I mentioned just a moment ago, it's more fundamental than that. We have a problem here in Australia, and it's more fundamental than the mandates or any of the lockdowns, although these are key issues that we will be touching upon. We have lost our way. Our representative democracy is no longer representative. In this video, I'll explain what I mean by that, and I'll show you a better way, a way that you and your voice can be more represented in Parliament. The major parties have become too big to fail, and have also become, even worse, too big to budge. If they're really there to represent you, how is it that they don't care what the people of Australia have to say? A classic example is Mr. Andrews standing in Parliament being asked the question, why do you think there are protesters out there? And he shrugs his shoulders and he says, I have no idea. That, to me, epitomises the place that we have reached. You are not being represented. What we now call representative government and representative democracy is a sham. So that's the reason I'm making this video, to explain to those of you who haven't made up their mind why it is really important, why in fact it's critical that at this juncture, at this crossroads, you vote for the minor parties. Let's talk about democracy for a moment. Anthropologists have basically found that the origins of democracy go back to hunter-gatherers, where they practiced the principle of majority rule. However, today's democracy, as we know it, is based on the rules and concepts of ancient Athens that started around 508 BCE. The Athenian version of democracy was called direct democracy, and that's where the citizens of Athens were able to vote on all the rules and laws that affected them in that society. As most of us are aware, that's not the type of democracy we have. The type of democracy we have in Australia is called representative democracy or indirect democracy. Now, there are critics of representative democracy, and they say that representative systems deteriorate towards oligarchy and patricracy. Now, let me put that up so we can see that word, and that's where a form of government in which the political parties are the primary basis of rule rather than citizens. So think about that. Who's ruling Australia at the moment? Is it the people of Australia, or is it the parties? Really, really fundamental, really, really important. If we are to call ourselves a democracy in any way, shape or form, it has to be the people who direct the direction via our representatives. That's what representative government means. However, that's not the case here in Australia right now. And for those of you who doubt what I'm saying, I want you to consider a couple of questions. Number one, who is your local member of Parliament? Do you know who they are? And if you do know who they are, when's the last time you heard from them outside of the election cycle? Even if you actually have heard from them, I think common sense will tell us that a representative is someone, it would have to be someone who knows you to some degree, and hopefully more than less. How can they possibly represent your interests if they don't even know you? Which is exactly where we're at in Australia. This is the key change that needs to occur. We need to go back to basics. We need your voice as a voter, as a person in this society, to be heard, to be respected, and to be acted upon. Let's talk about an alternative that currently exists by comparison, the Swiss model of democracy is called direct democracy. And this is where the Swiss citizens actually have a say in every facet of their life. They vote 4 times a year on things like local schools, if a local school should be built, if a road should be built. In fact, they vote on their constitution and in international law. Between 1995 and 2005, Swiss citizens voted 103 times on federal questions. They vote in every facet of their life. Can you imagine having that sort of say in how your society and your community evolved? How awesome would that be? That's what the minor parties would like for you. That's what the major parties have forgotten about and really don't want for you, because that means that they have to actually listen to what the electors have to say rather than doing whatever the hell they want. Now, for a visual representation of how direct democracy looks as compared to indirect or representative democracy, we're going to use the Topher marbles and containers. For the sake of this example, these are the fictional parties. We've got Liberal, Labor, Green, and the freedom-friendly minor parties here. And then we've got this lonesome voter over here who will basically showcase how the two systems are different. So in the indirect or representative democracy, which we currently enjoy in Australia and everywhere and in most other countries, essentially you have a party that you elect and they come along and they tell you what policies, what laws, what rules you will live your life by. However, as we've seen, when the majors become too big to fail and too big to even listen or budge, what we actually have is they work and they vote for their own benefit, not for yours. Now, this is where we can turn things around, all right? With the system mentioned that works in Switzerland and with the system that I'll be talking to you about later in this video with regards to what I'm intending on implementing in the seat of Lalor, where I'm based. So this is a more direct democracy and a democratic process. So essentially what we will do is, wouldn't it be nice if you could take, if you're a person who's, pro-business, wouldn't it be nice if you could take a little bit from, that tub, but you also care about employees' rights, and you take a few marbles and, from there, and, you also care about the environment. You know how important it is for that to be sorted. Okay, so you take a few marbles from there. And then, but you also value your freedom, and you also value being able to have a say. So, you take a few from there, a few from there, maybe a few from there as well. Now, all of a sudden, you have a mixed bag of marbles, which essentially represents your voice. Now, that is critical. Critical to us moving forward, critical to us improving the systems and our democracy in Australia. So really the question becomes, would you like to continue to be told what you think and what you like and which way, Australia's going to head? Or would you actually like some more of a say in the direction that Australia travels moving forward? We need to reunite Australia. We need to reunite families. We need to bring families back together and Australia back together. Enough of the division, enough of the destruction. We really need our voice, which I believe is the Australian voice, to be heard. Your voice to be heard. Okay? And this is why I am advocating and really strongly suggesting that you vote for the minor parties first, and you put these guys, the majors, last. This is the only way. If we bench the majors, they will have to stop and rethink. They will have to stop and really think about getting back to their roots and what they initially represented, because they no longer represent that. We all know it. So for this election, at this crossroads, please, I urge you, I really strongly, I can't say it strongly enough, we really all need to get behind the freedom-friendly minor parties. Do your homework, find out who they are, and I'll show you how you can do that quite easily shortly. But bottom line is, we really need to bench the majors. We really need to give the minor parties a go. So who are these minor parties? According to Topher, a freedom-friendly minor party is opposed to ongoing vaccine mandates, opposed to the COVID shutdowns, and they're opposed to the ongoing monitoring of the Australian people. And I, for one, would agree with him. I would personally lean towards a party that also advocated for a direct democratic model, just like they do in Switzerland. And we've just discussed why, to give you even more say in what occurs. However, any party that at the very bare minimum passes the threshold of being opposed to the ongoing vaccine mandates, to the ongoing COVID shutdowns, and the ongoing monitoring of the Australian people definitely passes the threshold of being a freedom-friendly minor party. And these are the parties that I strongly recommend that you consider. So which parties actually pass the threshold? Well, for one, the party that I'm involved in, which is the Australian Federation Party, that is definitely one of the freedom-friendly parties. Another one would be the UAP. Another one would be One Nation. And there's a bunch of other smaller parties like GAP and A1 that also fit into that category. You'll need to obviously do some research in terms of your electorate and who's in there that would fit that criteria. However, there is an easier way. If you were to jump onto the majorslast.com website, they've created an awesome application where you can actually type in your state and answer a couple of minor questions, and it will come up with a how to vote card. And how easy is that? It's a brilliant application. I've used it myself, obviously, and it really works. It's a great tool. You really must go and have a look. Let's talk about the major parties and what's likely to happen as we get closer to the election. What their polling will show is that as a result of all the amazing work that's being done out there by all the minor parties, the freedom-friendly minor parties, their polling will show that the minor parties are closing the gap. They are going to lose seats. That's inevitable. And they will more than likely start to put out advertising which says things like, don't vote for the freedom-friendly minor parties because if you do, Australia will just collapse. But don't believe it. It's all rubbish, and I'll explain why. As of June 2021, there are around 2.2 million public servants in every facet of life, in education, in health, environment, transport, finance, investment, trade, and a big shout out to them. You're doing an amazing job, guys. They essentially form the backbone of our government. They do most of the work. The transition from the major parties to the minor parties will be seamless like every other election has been and every other party change has been. Think about it. If that wasn't the case, every time we went from Labor to Liberal or anyone else, Australia would collapse and fall into chaos. It doesn't work that way, as we all know. Now, let's say that after looking at your candidates, after looking at the minor parties, what they stand for, and after listening to videos such as this one, you decide, okay, actually, you know what? The minor parties are the way to go. If enough of the minor parties get the votes so they can form government, your voice will now be heard. Your rights will now be amplified. And let me explain that. I, for one, in Lalor, intend to start what I call the voter retention model, which is virtually the same as the customer retention model, which is what most of you would have heard about. We will have a telemarketing company who will call all the electorate and make them aware of a phone number and an email address, and they can tell us what's going on. They can tell us their issues. They can tell us things that are happening so that we become aware of who you are and what your needs are. And this is over and above a monthly town square type model where I and all my colleagues will be going to the town hall and letting you know what we've done in the last 30 days, but also opening it up to the floor, to the electorate to tell us about what's going on in the community. In my electorate, I will be implementing the VRM model. Essentially, the way it'll work is you ring up or send us an email, a job will be opened with the issue that you've talked to us about. The job will stay open until you come back to us and tell us that your problem has been resolved. If the problem doesn't get resolved, we will then investigate why it hasn't been resolved, Is it because of an issue with the government department? If that's the case, well, obviously we'll step in and do what we can to rectify that. Or is it because there's a gap in policies and in laws that doesn't allow your problem to be resolved? Well, if that is the case, then we will go back to the party room. We will discuss all these issues where there are gaps, and then with consultation between yourselves and the community and ourselves, we will come up with policies that we will then take to Parliament in order to create laws that fill the gaps. Now that is real representative government. But if I or any of my colleagues in the freedom-friendly minor parties can get up and implement a model such as this, what do you think will happen to the rest of Australia? Do you think they might look at that model, to that electorate, and say, you know what, I want some of that? So by voting for us, one of the freedom-friendly parties who actually allow your voice to really be heard, what will occur is we will fundamentally change for the better democracy in Australia. This is what's at stake here. We're at the crossroads. We can either do that. We can either vote for the minor parties and move Australia's democracy in a better direction, or we can allow the same old to occur by voting the majors in and allow them to continue to tell us what we want rather than ask us what we want. Really, what type of Australia do you want to live in? What type of Australia do you want your kids to live in? What sort of future do you want? You're smart enough to know what you want. And we, the politicians, should be listening to that. Some of the people I'd like to thank include Peter Harris, who's the Australian Federation Party chairperson, Ricardo Bossi from the A1 Party, Monica Smith from Reignite Democracy, and the amazing job she's done creating the Put the Majors Last app. And just so that in case you didn't get it the first time, here it is again, Put the Majors Last. Also, Topher Field, who was the inspiration, and his video, who was the inspiration for this video, but also all the other great work that he's been doing. And he's the Liberal Democrat for Tasmania, the Senate for Tasmania. Craig Kelly from the UAP, George Christensen from One Nation Party, and there's obviously many, many more that I could go into, but I just really wanted to give out a big shout out to these people because they've been amazing in the work that they've done. Look, I want to thank you for watching this video. I really appreciate your time, and I look forward to answering any questions, and more importantly, I look forward to bringing back, with your help, bringing back real representative democracy. Thank you. My name is Peter Malliaros, and I endorse this message.